A hiker, equipped with hundreds of dollars in modern gear, is found frozen just miles from safety. It's a story we hear too often. Now imagine a man from 1830, facing a Rocky Mountain blizzard at 40 below with nothing but animal skins and a flintlock rifle. By all modern logic, he should perish. Yet he survives. How did these mountain men master an environment that so often defeats us? They understood that survival wasn't about gear, but about knowledge. They knew cold was a predator that attacked in 4 ways: conduction, convection, radiation, and evaporation. And they developed a sophisticated system to defeat every single one. But this knowledge was paid for in blood. For every man who mastered the cold, countless others vanished into the snow. My name is Sam, and it is Wild America. Part 1. The 4 Killers. The mountain man's war against cold was fought on 4 fronts. He didn't know the scientific terms, but he knew the killers intimately. First was conduction, the direct theft of heat through contact. He knew that sitting on a cold rock or lying on frozen ground was a direct pipeline for his precious body heat to be sucked away. The ground was a heat sink, a frozen thief that would never be satisfied. His first act in camp was always to create a barrier, a thick bed of pine boughs, dry leaves, or grasses, often a foot or more thick. This wasn't for comfort. It was a life-saving layer of trapped air, his shield against the conductive cold. His buffalo robe, a portable piece of insulation with its dense, woolly undercoat, served the same purpose. A single buffalo robe, properly tanned and cured, could weigh 40 pounds and contained thousands of individual hairs, each one creating a tiny pocket of insulating air. He never underestimated the relentless conductive power of the frozen earth. He knew that a man could freeze to death from below even if his upper body was warm. Next came convection, the thief that rides the wind. Every gust that penetrated his clothing stripped away the thin, warm layer of air his body worked so hard to create. Wind chill was not a concept he knew by name, but he understood its brutal reality. At 40 below, with a 20-mile-per-hour wind, the effective temperature drops to 70 below. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in minutes. To combat this, he relied on a windproof outer layer, often a buckskin shirt or a heavy wool capote. Unlike modern breathable fabrics that can fail in high winds, the dense grain of brain-tanned leather was a near impenetrable barrier. The tanning process, using the animal's own brains mixed with water, created a supple yet tough material that could flex with his movements while blocking the wind. He chose his campsite to break the wind, seeking the shelter of a rock outcropping, a dense stand of trees, or a deep ravine. He was always thinking about how to create a pocket of still air around his body, a calm harbor in a sea of wind. Third was radiation, the silent, invisible drain of heat into the vast, cold emptiness of the winter sky. Even on a still night, an uncovered head or exposed hands would radiate heat away from the body. The mountain man's wool or fur cap was not a fashion statement. It was a critical piece of heat retention gear. He knew that an uncovered head was a chimney for body heat. Medical studies today confirm that up to 40% of body heat can be lost through an uncovered head in cold conditions. He wore his hat to bed, pulling his buffalo robe over his head as he slept, plugging every potential leak with obsessive care. He understood that heat, like water, will always flow from a higher concentration to a lower one, and the cold, empty sky was a vacuum, always pulling, always taking. On a clear, cold night, the temperature could drop 20 degrees or more as heat radiated into space. He knew this, and he prepared for it. Finally, there was evaporation, the most insidious killer. The mountain man knew that sweat was a death sentence in winter. That moisture was the cold's greatest ally. Water evaporating from the skin carries away heat 25 times faster than air. This is why he dressed in layers, not just for insulation, but for moisture management. He could add or remove layers to prevent overheating during strenuous activity, like tracking game or chopping wood. His inner wool layers could absorb significant moisture without feeling wet and would still insulate. Wool can absorb up to 30% of its weight in water and still retain 80% of its insulating properties. He knew the trapper's saying, "Cotton kills." A sweaty cotton shirt was a cold, clammy shroud that would suck the life out of him. Cotton, when wet, loses all its insulating value and actually conducts heat away from the body. This forefront war against the cold was the central organizing principle of his winter life. Every piece of gear, every action was a calculated move in this deadly game. Comment conduction if you've ever felt the cold steal your heat through the ground. Part 2. The living layering system. The mountain man's clothing was an adaptable system, a living, breathing shield. It was not static, it was dynamic, constantly adjusted to match his activity level and the changing conditions. This was the key difference between his approach and ours. We put on a jacket and expected to work in all conditions. He knew better. The foundation was wool. Wool was the miracle fiber of the frontier. It can absorb up to 30% of its weight in moisture without feeling wet and retains its insulating properties even when damp. This was the critical factor. A mountain man knew he would get wet, either from external snow or his own sweat. A wool shirt or union suit acted as a buffer, wicking moisture away from the skin while still keeping him warm. It was his second skin. The wool used by mountain men was often greasy wool that had not been fully scoured of its natural lanolin. This lanolin made the wool naturally water-resistant and gave it a distinctive, slightly oily smell. It also made it incredibly durable. A good wool shirt could last for years of hard use. Over the wool came buckskin. A brain-tanned buckskin shirt was his windproof, breathable, soft-shell jacket. It was incredibly tough and blocked convective heat loss. A properly tanned buckskin shirt could stop the wind while still allowing some moisture vapor to escape. This prevented the buildup of sweat that would later freeze. However, buckskin's fatal flaw was that it lost its insulating properties when wet, becoming heavy and stiff. The mountain man treated his buckskins with beaver fat or bear grease for water resistance, rubbing the fat into the leather until it was saturated. This created a semi-waterproof barrier that would shed light rain and snow. But he knew that in a prolonged downpour, he needed his final layer. The capote, or blanket coat, was his hard shell. Made from a heavy wool blanket, often a Hudson's Bay point blanket, the capote was a masterpiece of functional design. It was a long, hooded coat worn over all other layers. The dense, oily wool was highly water-resistant, shedding snow and rain. The hood protected the head and face, and the long cut protected the legs. The capote was a portable shelter, a final defense against the elements. The Hudson's Bay point blanket was a specific trade good, with the points, short black lines woven into the blanket, indicating its size and weight. A 4-point blanket was the most common, measuring about 72 by 90 inches and weighing about 8 pounds. These blankets were highly prized and were a form of currency in the fur trade. This system was not static. The mountain man constantly adjusted it, shedding a layer during strenuous work and immediately putting it back on when he stopped. He understood that staying warm was about balance, the balance between heat production and heat loss, insulation and ventilation. It was a delicate life-or-death dance. He knew that if he overheated and sweated, he would pay for it later when he stopped moving and the sweat froze against his skin. Part 3. The Holy Trinity of Fire. For the mountain man, the ability to create fire quickly and reliably in any condition was the single most important survival skill. Fire was life. It was warmth, it was food, it was safety, and it was sanity. Without fire, a man was dead. It was that simple. His fire-starting kit was a study in efficiency and redundancy. The core of the kit was the Holy Trinity: flint, steel, and char cloth. A piece of hard, sharp-edged flint was struck against a C-shaped piece of high-carbon steel, creating a shower of hot sparks. These sparks, landing on the highly flammable char cloth, would create a glowing ember. The steel striker was not just any piece of steel. It had to be high-carbon steel, hardened and tempered to create the hardest possible edge. When struck by the flint, tiny shavings of steel would be sheared off. These shavings, heated by the friction of the strike, would ignite in the air, creating the sparks. The mountain man often made his own strikers from old files or rasps, materials he knew would have the right carbon content. Char cloth was the secret ingredient. Made by heating linen or cotton in an airtight tin, the resulting carbonized cloth would catch a spark and smolder with a low, steady heat without bursting into flame. It was the perfect bridge between the fleeting spark and the sustained flame. It was the secret to reliable fire in the damp, cold wilderness. The process of making char cloth was simple, but required attention to detail. A piece of linen or cotton was placed in a small tin with a tiny hole punched in the lid. The tin was then placed in a fire. As the cloth heated, it would release smoke and gases through the hole. When the smoke stopped, the char cloth was done. The result was a black, brittle material that would catch a spark and glow like a coal. Comment char cloth below if you've ever tried making this amazing tinder. Once he had an ember, the mountain man transferred it to a tinder bundle, a carefully prepared nest of shredded cedar bark, cattail fluff, or dry grass. He would gently fold the bundle around the ember and blow with a steady, patient breath. The key was to blow gently and steadily, not too hard, not too soft. Too hard and you blow the ember out. Too soft and it doesn't get enough oxygen. With a sudden whoosh, the tinder bundle would burst into flame. He had brought fire to life. But the mountain man was a realist. He always had a backup plan. He might carry a burning glass, a simple magnifying lens that could focus the sun's rays to ignite tinder. On a sunny day, this was the fastest and easiest way to start a fire. He might also resort to the ancient method of the bow drill, a friction fire-starting technique that required skill and patience but could create fire from nothing but wood. He was a master of improvisation. He knew that the man with only one way to make fire was a dead man waiting to happen. Part 4. The Language of Wood. The mountain man understood the language of wood. He could look at a tree and know its name, its properties, and its uses. He knew that softwoods like pine and fir burned hot and fast, perfect for getting a fire going quickly. He knew that hardwoods like oak and hickory burned slow and steady, producing a long-lasting bed of coals, perfect for cooking and overnight warmth. He knew that standing dead wood was the best source of dry fuel, even in a rainstorm. A dead tree that is still standing has had time to dry out, and its bark often sheds water, keeping the inner wood dry. He could read the forest like a library of fuel, selecting the right wood for the right job. This deep knowledge of his environment is something we have almost completely lost. He knew the specific properties of dozens of tree species. He knew that cedar bark made excellent tinder, that birch bark would burn even when wet, that cottonwood produced a lot of smoke but little heat, that aspen burned clean and hot. He knew that willow and alder were good for quick, hot fires for cooking, while oak and hickory were best for long-lasting coals. This was not book learning, this was experiential knowledge, earned through years of trial and error. Let me know in the comments what you think is the most important piece of woodcraft a person can learn. His fires were not just piles of burning logs, they were carefully engineered structures. The reflector fire, with a wall of logs or rocks built behind it, would reflect heat into his lean-to shelter, effectively doubling the warmth. The star fire, with logs arranged like the spokes of a wheel, would burn slowly through the night, requiring minimal tending. As each log burned, he would push it further into the center. The Dakota fire hole, a fire built in a pit with an air tunnel, would conceal the flames and burn efficiently even in high winds, drawing air from below and creating a natural draft. Fire was the center of his world. It cooked his food, dried his clothes, and kept the predators of the night at bay. But more than that, it was a source of psychological comfort, a bulwark against the crushing loneliness of the winter wilderness. A man alone in the mountains, with only the howl of the wind and the cry of the wolf for company, could find solace in the crackling flames. Fire was a companion, a friend, a lifeline to sanity. Part 5. The Internal Furnace. The mountain man's most important weapon against the cold was his own body. He understood that the human body is a furnace that must be stoked with the right fuel. Fat. Fat was the high-octane energy source of the fur trade. His diet was a carnivore's dream, consuming massive quantities of meat with a focus on the fattiest parts: tongue, liver, bone marrow, and the thick back fat of a buffalo. He considered beaver tail, a solid mass of fat, a delicacy. A single beaver tail could weigh 2 to 3 pounds and was almost pure fat. Roasted over a fire until the skin blistered and peeled away, the meat inside was rich, oily, and incredibly calorie-dense. It was a prized food, often reserved for special occasions or shared among friends. He knew about rabbit starvation, the paradoxical condition where a man could starve on a diet of lean meat. Rabbit meat is so lean that the body expends more energy digesting it than it gains from the protein. Without fat, the body cannot properly metabolize protein. The result is a slow, agonizing death, even with a full belly. The mountain men called it mal de caribou, or rabbit sickness. They knew that protein alone was not enough. They needed fat. He consumed an estimated 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day, much of it from fat, to fuel his internal furnace and maintain his core body temperature. In the extreme cold of a Rocky Mountain winter, the body burns calories at an accelerated rate, just to stay warm. This high-fat diet also powered the strenuous physical labor of his daily life, setting traps, skinning animals, chopping wood, and traveling through deep snow. He was a master of preserving his fuel. He rendered buffalo fat into tallow, a hard white fat that could be stored for months without spoiling. He smoked meat into jerky, concentrating the protein and making it lightweight and portable. He made pemmican, a mixture of dried meat, rendered fat, and berries, a superfood that could sustain a man for days. A pound of pemmican contained over 3,000 calories and would not spoil for years. This reliance on fat shaped his hunting strategies. He didn't just hunt for meat, he hunted for fat. He knew a bear just before hibernation was a walking treasure trove of calories, its body packed with thick layers of fat. He knew that a buffalo cow in the fall, after a summer of grazing on rich prairie grasses, would have a thick layer of back fat, sometimes 6 inches deep. This was the prize, the fuel that would keep him alive through the winter. Comment beaver tail below if you'd be brave enough to try this mountain man delicacy. This is a profound piece of forgotten knowledge. In our modern world, with its fear of fat and its obsession with lean protein, we have forgotten that fat is the fuel of life. The mountain man lived it, and it kept him alive. Our ancestors understood what we have forgotten. that in a world without central heating and grocery stores, fat is not the enemy. Fat is survival. Part 6. The Lost Mindset. So what did the mountain men know about cold that we have forgotten? It wasn't a single skill. It was a mindset, a different way of seeing the world. We see cold as an inconvenience, an enemy to be defeated with technology. We turn up the thermostat, put on a high-tech jacket, and get in our heated cars. We have become soft, complacent, and ignorant. We have outsourced our survival to machines and systems that we do not understand and cannot repair. But here's the problem nobody talks about. Our reliance on technology has made us vulnerable. When the power goes out, when the car breaks down, when the supply chain fails, we are suddenly, terrifyingly exposed. We find that we have forgotten how to fight. We have forgotten the knowledge that kept our ancestors alive for millennia. The mountain man had no such illusions. He knew he was not in control. He knew he was a small, fragile creature in a vast, indifferent wilderness. He did not try to conquer nature. He tried to live in harmony with it. He adapted to the cold. He respected it. He knew that the cold was not evil. It was simply indifferent. It would kill him without malice, without hesitation, if he made a mistake. His knowledge was not theoretical. It was experiential, written in the scars on his hands and the memory of friends lost to the cold. It was a knowledge that was earned, not bought. Every skill he possessed had been tested in the crucible of survival. He knew what worked because he had seen what didn't. He had buried the men who failed. This is the great forgotten lesson of the mountain men. True survival is not about what you have. It is about what you know. It is not about defeating nature. It is about understanding your place within it. It is about respect. It is about humility. It is about the willingness to learn from the land, to listen to the wind, and to accept that you are not the master of the universe. The mountain man knew that every day in the wilderness was a gift, a day stolen from the jaws of death. He knew that survival was not guaranteed, that comfort was an illusion, and that the only thing standing between him and oblivion was his knowledge, his skills, and his will to live. So the next time you feel the bite of a cold wind, remember the mountain men. Remember their resilience, their ingenuity, and their profound knowledge of the natural world. And ask yourself, what have we forgotten? And what will it cost us to remember? The answer, I fear, is more than we can afford to pay. See you again next time. Subscribe to Wild America for more stories about the skills and secrets of the past. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America.